want to forget. So Dr. McKay is a passionate advocate of quality programs and training for all ECE professionals. She was here yesterday, did a fantastic job. You can catch her last presentation on our YouTube channel. And we're so excited about this one because it is empowering our youngest learners through STEAM. Okay, if you will go to the next slide. The first disclaimer just says an online degree from Ashford University does not lead to immediate teacher licensure in any state. And if you want to become a classroom teacher at Ashford, you must contact your state's education department to become certified and licensed. Next slide, please. And this also says that Ashford is not responsible for any links, videos, pictures, etc. that we share in our sessions. So Dr. McKay, the floor is yours.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for having me today as a keynote. I'm afraid that this is probably going to be another speed race because there is so much information on this topic, and hopefully the handout has been uploaded for everybody. If not, definitely make sure when you do get that download that you save it, because all of the details that I'm going to cover today in this session are going to be in that handout. So what is STEAM? Well, we're going to start with what STEAM is not. And that is probably the most important thing that we have to take into consideration in our field. STEAM is not, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera just because I don't want anybody to be distracted. STEAM is not flashcards. Flashcards, no flashcards, please. STEAM is going to be hands-on activities. So it's not worksheets. Like, I love these quotes that say that worksheet changed my life, said no child ever. I remember from my daughter is my youngest child, she's 23, kindergarten, this is before we had her diagnosed. She is an Asperger's baby, or an Asperger's adult now, I guess I should say. The worksheets that my daughter brought home from her public school kindergarten could have planted an entire new forest. So worksheets are not, they're very passive. They're not interactive, right? And memorization, it is not memorizing. I love this. This kid says, I'm not a floppy disk. No, that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to, I call it, if you've probably heard this phrase before, we are guides on the side, not sages on the stage, which means that we do not just impart our knowledge to our children, but we actually work with them side by side. And that's what STEAM is all about. And here's the crazy thing about it is that you guys have been doing it. If you're in the field, you've been doing it. Everybody gets so excited and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how to incorporate STEAM. I don't know what to do. How am I going to put this in here? You're already doing it. You just don't realize it. And then the other thing is that we are building brains, guys. STEAM, all of the hands-on activities that we do, we are building brains. And so we want to make sure that we are communicating this with our families as well. But again, that emphasis is that most of the stuff you're already doing. So it's science. Science is how we think and how we observe. And everybody knows the scientific process, right? It is a way of thinking. Technology is using tools and learning how things work. Most people, when they see technology in the STEAM process, think that we are talking about using computers and iPads and all of those things, which those are good and they have a small place in the ECE world. But really, we want to look at technology as tools and learning how things work. Engineering is problem solving and building. Hey, we do that every day in the block area, right? In our construction areas, outside, on the playground, in the sandbox, etc. And art is thinking and creating, giving them the creative outlet to express those things that are going on as a result of all of these other things, the thinking. And I love how this does kind of connect to our prior couple of sessions where we're talking about mindfulness and talking about how to have a well mind and those types of things. And children need that outlet as well. So we need to give them this aesthetics of really getting in and thinking and creating. And then, of course, math is counting and measuring, right? So we do that every day in everyday activities. Most of the pictures that you will see are going to be of the kiddos that I had in my very last live classroom, I guess I should say, from 2011 to 2016. I did a favor for a friend who was having a baby, and she said, would you, I wasn't working at the time, I was working on my doctorate, and she said, would you watch my baby? And that turned into 7 children that were in hands-on learnings home preschool. So you will see lots of my kiddos in these pictures, but we did this every day. And so you can see they are about 2 here. And they are, yes, using table knives to cut apples, which some people say, that doesn't happen. It can, and they were very, very good about it. It's hands-on, guys. It's examining. It is building. This is the children playing, pouring, filling, mixing, experimenting, all of these things that we know that children do. And the nice thing about this is that we are always meeting the PILES domains and early learning standards. When you get the handout, I have included not necessarily your average PILES domains, but I looked at the high scope key developmental indicators from their curriculum. Very, very similar to the regular PILES domains checklist you may be familiar with. And then the references that I give you are the Florida early learning standards because I am in Florida. And so in the handout, I show you how all of these activities connect to those learning standards. So they are inherent in each area. High scope key developmental indicators, again, are very, very similar to PILES domains practices, milestones that you would see in checklists. So one of the things that I did is, when I teach about theory, I look at some of the folks that get overlooked when we talk about theory. So, we have the regulars, we have Piaget, we have Dewey, we have Erickson, we have Montessori, we have Vygotsky, and some of those are some of my very favorites. But I really started to dig into Friedrich Froebel. If you are familiar with Froebel, he was the father of kindergarten, again, because he created the first kindergarten, and it's called Child's Garden because he did the majority of his work outside in his garden with his children, all the children that came to his school. And his theory is based on a couple of things. Humans are creative. We were created to be creative. And that play is the engine that drives learning. And this is so very important. I want to share with you, before we get into the gifts, just a quote of his. He says that play of children is not recreation. It means earnest work. Play is the purest intellectual production of the human being in this stage, for the whole man is visible in them in his finest capacities, in his innermost being. And that is so true. I mean, that is what we do. We are building brains. We are building people. We are supporting the foundation of higher education in preschool, right? So Froebel was also, people might be familiar with the fact that he did create these gifts, but a lot of people don't know about the gifts. And basically he created several. These are just the first 10 that he created. He is credited as being one of the first ones to develop manipulative toys for children. And so again, in your handout, these will all be explained in detail. But the first one is the colored ball set. And basically, he created this one first because he said that's the most recognizable form that children start with. So babies like balls, right? It's something easy for them to hold. They are fascinated by them. And then when you add the string to them, it is so easy. And I recreated this. You can spend like $1,000 on buying a set of Froebel's gifts, but you can make them. I used embroidery thread and large pom-poms in these colors and made my own. So easy and so inexpensive that if something happens to them, I can replace them easily. You can see also in the gifts, I will just tell you this kind of up front. Remember that there are 3 things that he included with each one of these gifts. Basically, it was forms of knowledge. So really that kind of attributes to the math and science area. Forms of life, which is the real world connections, which kind of includes the arts, and some of those things that we talked about as far as, engineering and technology, forms of life. And then forms of beauty, which is where we really get into that aesthetic domain or the creative arts domain. And so you will see some examples of this throughout this presentation. So remember those forms of knowledge, forms of life, and forms of beauty. All of these gifts had something to go with them. And so an example of that would be, this is gift number 2. This is fascinating. If you Google this, Froebel's gift number 2 on YouTube, you will find a video where a guy uses this and he spins these. When you spin these, look what happens. You see different shapes than what are represented when they are still. That fascinates me, you guys, and I've been on this planet for a long time. So this is one of those things. And so the forms of beauty here is also part of the form of knowledge in that we understand what a cube is and a sphere and a cylinder. It's just amazing to me that that this is, from the 1700s, and how useful it is to us today. Gift 3 is the set of 10 cubes that are 1 inch. And again, you can see forms of life, forms of knowledge, how they go together, what can be created with them. And then, of course, forms of beauty, the patterning that is going on here. And then we have gift 4, which is the long rectangles. In my world, and I will say that for the 1 inch cubes, you can go to Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Joann's, and buy those 1 inch cubes and create your own. Again, very inexpensively. These, my representation of these are Jenga blocks. Their Jenga blocks are a little bit thicker, but do serve the same purpose. And so again, here we go. Here are the forms of life. Gardens, garden gate, open garden, watering trough, all of these things, forms of life, right? Forms of beauty, the patterns here, and then forms of knowledge. Look at this, guys. This is early math. This is fractioning. This is units. That's where the unit blocks came from, was originally from Froebel's gifts. Gift 5, we added triangles to them and a little bit more. For any of you who are math aficionados, you might recognize that this is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or the Pythagorean theorem. Now, we're not going to teach our children to try to say Pythagorean theorem, but we do get to teach them that when we do this, we get this. How cool is that? Again, here are the forms of life, forms of knowledge, and my favorite, the forms of beauty. It amazes me the things that can be created with these blocks. Then we have gift 6, which is just a little step up with adding some different sizes and shapes of the same thing. Here's the really cool thing. Back in the 1700s, when Froebel's, or actually I guess it was the 1800s, when Froebel's gifts were on display at the World's Fair, a young child and his mother, and the child's name was Frank Lloyd Wright, visited that exhibit, and he fell in love with it. She fell in love with it. She took the idea, sold it to, I don't know if she physically sold it, but she went to Milton Bradley, and you will see what happened when Milton Bradley took a hold of Froebel's gifts. But this is one of the buildings that Frank Lloyd Wright designed, and it is based on the blocks of gift number 6. How cool is that? You're teaching architecture and y'all didn't know it, right? Again, here are our forms of life, our forms of knowledge, and of course, our forms of beauty. So what does all this have to do with STEAM? Trust me, I'm going to make those connections. Um, then these are some of my favorites, the Parker Tree tiles. These are great. I love playing with these. And of course, here we go. We have forms of life. He added color to these because as children get older, color is important, and you notice that the pieces are smaller. And I'm sure many of you probably have sets of these in your manipulative area. If you look at these figures down here, Frank Lloyd Wright also took these. He was very famous for including windmills in his architecture, and that is where that came from as well. Again, here are our forms of beauty. And then gifts 8, where I call these sticks and circles. These are great products that we can use to teach children, hey, we can actually make the alphabet. If you're doing the old-fashioned Zahner Blozer, this is kind of where those, or where Zahner Blozer kind of came from, was the sticks and circles. So, but also, look at the forms of beauty that are here. And again, how does this add to the previous gifts that we have for children? And again, here we go. Our forms of life, our forms of beauty, and some more forms of life and forms of beauty with the circles. Love it. And then the point. And Froebel decided that starting with the ball, he worked from the larger concept and worked down to the fine concept. So a lot of times when we're teaching, we think, oh, well, we need to start with the point because points put together make a line, lines put together make these. When we put lines together, they make cubes, et cetera, et cetera. But he started from the opposite end and created, he went down to the point. And here we go, guys. Gift number 10. Milton Bradley is the company that produced the Tinker Toys. These were actually just sticks and dried peas, not so dried that they wouldn't work by sticking things in them, but they were just soft enough to hold the, firm enough to hold the sticks in place, but soft enough for the points of the sticks to go in there. And yes, this was the precursor to Tinker Toys. Again, can you see our concepts here? We have science, we have technology, we have engineering, we have arts, and we have math. And you can see the windmill, of course, is in that as well. So what, again, does this have to do with all of our things? Here are a couple of my kiddos doing some sand and water play in the home. Every kid starts out as a natural born scientist. Carl Sagan, one of my favorite quotes. Here is the scientific method for babies. Every baby knows the scientific method. You make an observation, right? You look at that and you form a hypothesis. You perform the experiment, analyze that data, report the findings, and then we invite others to reproduce the results. How cool is this? This is what happens on a day-to-day basis when we turn these kiddos loose. So for infants and toddlers, it's exploring objects. It is object permanence. It is same and different. All of these concepts are what we teach when we let children explore the environment and we prepare that environment for them to explore. And most importantly, I think the issues of time and space are very good because when we give them the time and space and the appropriate materials, they're going to do this over and over and over again on a daily basis, minute by minute basis, right? And of course, we know every baby learns cause and effect. Here's what it looks like in photos, guys. This is science. Yes, I stripped my kiddos down to the diapers and they went out and they did pretty much anything that was short of eating dirt or eating stuff that wasn't made for them. But very early on, I taught them the concept of gardening. We would go out, we would work in the garden every day, and then they would understand. They would watch me bring in the food, and I would serve it to them for lunch. This continued until I stopped, until they all went to kindergarten. And to this day, this is Bentley. Miss Bentley here is now in 4th grade, and she is a fantastic little cook, let me tell you. She is very interested in baking and creating and these concepts of gardening and applying all of that to what she does today. This is Miss Trinity. This is our Diary of a Worm unit that we did. And we went out and we dug for worms. Trinity at that time, I think, was just 1, and she was my most explorative child in the program. She had no fear whatsoever, and she really literally dug into every activity that we did. So again, the thing is that, you know, we started with STEM, and now we have STEAM, and yep, folks, it's coming down the pike. I think we're going to have STREAM. So the R would then include those reading, those literacy connections. And so what are we doing, guys? We're back to good old math, science, all of the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? So there's a literacy connection. So when we did that, not only did we read Diary of a Worm, I had all of these books ready for them to explore. In the 3 to 5-year-old, again, this was my home daycare, and I didn't child-proof it. I didn't, you know, create a separate space for them per se. I mean, I did, but I didn't. They pretty much had run of the full home and the full backyard, and whatever they wanted to do, whatever they kind of brought to their minds, we followed suit. So in the 3 to 5 age group, we're looking at observation, classifying, all of these good scientific concepts that they are going to do. And every single one of these is present right now in this picture. So when I do this, and including data analysis, tell me, they said, when I pour this amount in here, this is what happens. That's data analysis, guys. You know, I want to fill this picture, this kind of thing. All of this is happening in this picture right here. This is Mr. Carson. You will see his face quite a bit as well. And then, of course, our Diary of a Worm station. We did in our science area, this was actually in one of the college classes I taught, where we had kiddos come in and spend a day in our model classroom, and they created their own worm compost. Some of them we did in plastic bottles, some of them we did in coffee cans. But this whole life cycle of a worm and what they're good for, if you've never read Diary of a Worm, you need to. It's really good. And guess what, guys? Yep, I have a worm compost out on my back patio right now. I do it all the time. And I wish I should have added some pictures. We actually went through, now that we're here in Florida, we've been here for about a year, we have planted milkweed, butterfly milkweed in our backyard. I had no idea. When I planted this, I just wanted to attract some butterflies. Well, apparently that is what monarch butterflies love the most. So I went outside one day and I was like, oh my gosh, all my leaves of my milkweed are gone. I went out there to look at it, and I had 9 big, fat monarch caterpillars eating away on my butterfly bush. Well, I went out the next day, and guess what? They were all gone. I was like, oh my gosh, where did they go? I started looking. I was sitting eating lunch on my back patio. I looked down at the chair, and there's a cocoon hanging off of, or a chrysalis hanging off the bottom of my patio chair. So I went on a scavenger hunt. I mean, I don't have any kids here right now. It's just me and my husband. But I went on a scavenger hunt looking for all these chrysalises, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have butterflies. Well, guess what happened today, you guys? Today we had butterflies. And so that whole life cycle is so huge. And this was better than any worm that you can buy from any company and put in those wonderful little butterfly nets. This was just in my backyard. And I kept telling my husband, like, where are the kids? I need the kids here. So I sent pictures to them, and they were like super thrilled to see them. They were just like, oh my gosh, this is so great. But it also can relate to anything that you are doing. And if you are not doing loose parts right now, I really encourage you to check this out, this information, because loose parts, again, are some of those things that we can do to really support our children's exploration of the materials. And again, I've made that connection to some literacy. So let's talk about technology. Technology, again, remember, is really at its bare roots exploring tools and how to use them. It's just a tool. In terms of getting the kids working together and motivating them, the teacher is the most important. Anybody want to take a guess on who said that? Since you can't really talk to me right now, I'm going to tell you that was Bill Gates. Okay, so it's just a tool. How cool is that? Some of the images of what it looks like. I actually made one of these, but I didn't have time to upload my personal picture of this. So easy. I bought everything at the Dollar Tree to make this, including my caster wheels, different kinds of locks, all of these things. I even got some of those push button lights that have batteries so they could just turn on the lights. And there was also one that was a light switch. And voila, I have a board. I bought a craft board at Hobby Lobby. That was probably the most money I spent on the entire project, was the craft board that it's on. My husband very begrudgingly put it together for me because he doesn't understand the concepts. My husband is a programmer and he doesn't think like early childhood people do. So I have to really explain it to him. But look at this, guys. This is free, basically, right? Look at the amazing things that technology helps us do. And so look at this. You can just see that she is just thinking and reasoning here and using all of those concepts we talked about. And of course, the literacy connections. Hello. I love these kind of books. These are so easy to make if you are a good sewer or you know somebody who is a good sewer. I'm a medium sewer, so I just have somebody make them for me. And then, of course, board books. You can't go wrong with those. Very, very simple, and it introduces them to the concept. So what does it look like in the 3 to 5-year-old category? Well, here we go. This is Mr. Carson. One of the things that we did on their birthdays every year is they got to make their own pizzas. So they did everything from the dough all the way up to the toppings. And so, yes, I did. I gave him the big old rolling pin and I let him roll out the dough. He was probably, yeah, again, about 2.5 here because this was November of 2013. But the concepts that he learned, he talked about it. He talked about how it felt. He talked about rolling. He talked about how it flattened out the dough. All of those amazing things that would never happen if we did not let them have this opportunity to do so. So again, he is practicing all of these skills: observing, experimenting, predicting. What if I go this way with it? What if I roll it backwards? Because at first he was just rolling it forwards. Communicating ideas, hey, we could use this rolling pin to do other things. How to use the tool, and problem solving. If it was too thick in one area, I asked him. He would say, it's really big over here. What do I need to do? And I would tell him, well, let's roll it this way. Or I would ask him, what do you think you should do? Creating an area, and I just saw a book that is going to, or it's actually already published by Red Leaf Press, that is called A Maker's Station for your early childhood classroom. I was so giddy and excited about that. I couldn't stand it, so I am going to be ordering that book soon. But how cool is it to give them a station that is called the Invention Station or the Maker Station? And in your handout, I've given you not 100 invitations to build, but I've given you a list of 101 objects that you can put in your Inventor's Technology Engineering Station. And again, 99.9% of it is either free or easy to find at the Dollar Tree. So there is, no excuses for this. Again, probably the most expensive is buying these books. And if you're not familiar with this series of books, I highly recommend them. They are awesome. But look at this. This is just an invitation for children to like go, oh my gosh, what can I do with this stuff? Right? I mean, I hope you guys are looking at this and going, this looks like so much fun, right? So again, my connection to literacy is I'm looking at tools that people use. I actually put blow dryers without the cords, of course, in and things like that in their station so that they could take them apart and look at them. You know, we would be careful to make sure there were no small pieces. I would give them instructions. If there's really small pieces, we know what to do. We do not put them in our mouths, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, robot making. That's the big thing right now. So can you create a robot? What would your robot look like? So, of course, technology kind of leads us into engineering. This is not my kiddos, but if you are not familiar with tough spot trays, again, you need to become familiar with them because they are amazing. They're very difficult to find. They mostly come from Europe, but I have found them on Amazon. But these are great ways to set up provocations for children, and you'll see these a couple of ways, a couple of times in my presentation. But here we are at the beginning of engineering because we're learning some concepts here of, these circle things fit in these circle things, right? But I wonder what happens if I put some of these into, you know, the square peg in the round hole kind of thing. So we're kind of developing this concept of how things fit together. And this is a basic concept for engineering. So I don't think outside of the box. I think of what I can do with the box. And once a teacher, always a teacher. You should see my closet in my office because I still have so much stuff. And if I were doing this in person, like I presented this at the FLACY conference last year, I made a tinkering bag for every participant in the session. And it was like, you should have seen the majority of the people, they came in and they sat down and they opened those bags and they're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with it? Look, it's Play-Doh. Look, it's a stick. I mean, they were just so excited. I did have 2 participants, however, when we started doing some of these activities together, the activities that you will find in the handout, they were like, I don't understand what you want me to do. I don't understand. I don't know what to do with all of this stuff. And to me, I was so sad. And I was like, I had to work side by side with them. And I said, you know, use your imagination. And these were young folks that were having this issue. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this means that you did not get any tinkering when you were a kid. So what can you do with the box? I still collect all of this stuff so that in case I do this presentation again or I get to make these tinkering bags again, I have it. Much again to my husband's chagrin. So one of the things that we like to do, we did a Arctic unit for the month of January. We kind of did all things winter, snow, Arctic, penguins, polar bears, the whole kind of thing. I did monthly projects. Basically, I did mostly project-based. We would talk about it. I would use KWL charts, et cetera, et cetera. This activity was actually building igloos with marshmallows and vanilla icing, so very non-toxic. And I do know and I'm aware that there are some people out there who say you should not use food. You know, I get that. There are 2 sides to every argument, so I'm not going to debate that here. This is one of the things that we did. Now, probably the worst thing that happened with this activity in particular was that we forgot to shut the door to our room when we went out for rest time in the living room, and the dogs went in and ate all of our projects. So we had to rebuild them again, but they were quite okay with that. They were like, oh, well, we'll just make new ones. That is what we want to hear from our kiddos, right? So again, here we are, we're doing all of these right here is all represented there. Blocks. Block is a very early foundation for our engineering skills. So we want to make sure at the youngest age that we are giving them the opportunity to do these things. And here's another tough spot. This is one of my favorites. This was actually an activity materials that I included in the tinkering bags that I gave out at the live presentation. This is pipe cleaners, straws, Play-Doh, and Cheerios again. And it was just set up like this. And so you just are asked to create whatever you want to create. I personally love this one because it looks like, to me, it looks like scissors. So I thought that was pretty ingenious. But basically their materials were these. How do you use this material to create something, make something, etc. And of course, the literacy connection as well. And you guys, these books are out there. It's not hard to do. For the 3 to 5-year-olds, I love this picture for 2 reasons. Everybody asked me, what does this have to do with engineering? Well, this is a tool, right? The tape dispenser, and they were wrapping Christmas presents. When I had my own program, every month I would send out my newsletter, and in the newsletter there would be something for the family to do together. And so around December, I would say one of the neat things that you can do if you do Christmas presents at your house is let your children help you wrap presents. They thought I was nuts. And I said, just go home and try it. Give them some tape, sit with them side by side, right? And let them do it. And they came back, like some of the parents that were so doubtful came back to me the next day and they said, we had an amazing time last night. We did this for like 3 hours. How cool is that? They loved this. They were actually wrapping their presents for their parents. And look at the concentration on her face. That's what I love. I'm telling you, I just enjoyed having this family home program so much because I really got to see in depth. It was kind of like my own little research project on this. So they're planning, they're problem solving, they're using resources, they're aware of spatial things, measurement. I love this because kids like, oh, I got to have a lot of tape, right? And that's okay because tape is not that expensive. Patterning, those types of things. Again, look at this. We've got some little Frank Lloyd Wrights going on here. I love this one. I wish that this was something that my kids had created, but it was not because I didn't have all of these pieces at home. But I love how they have incorporated everything. This is their own little zoo, right? And look at how much concept has gone into this and how they have decided, I need to have something up here to maybe provide a barrier. Maybe it is just for decoration. Who knows? I just find it fascinating how that works. If you're familiar with the stages of blocks, this is bridging, but boy, is this bridging to the nth degree, right? This is some amazing stuff. And again, the thought processes that go into this is super. This is another one of the activities that I put in the bag. If we were together, I would ask you to take out your pieces and construct a bridge. This is my favorite one. One of the things that we do is we say, okay, if we're going to bridge right here, how many marbles will it hold? Will it hold the marbles? Because remember, bridges have to be able to hold up cars, right? Or whatever goes across it. So what is the best shape to use for building these bridges? And so what do? They see that it sags in the middle, even when we've got a good support here. This works, but look at what is best here, and that is the process that they go through. And again, kind of looking at the time when I had the family home preschool, they were actually painting one of the bridges. At the time I lived just outside of Louisville, Kentucky, and they were painting one of the bridges. And so we walked across the bridge and we were like, oh, we talked about things. And I said, do you guys think that you could make a bridge? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. And so we went back home and I gave them the materials and they built bridges. It was great. And I can't find the pictures. I'm still looking for pictures, but this is another thing, super, super simple and easy, Dollar Tree and free materials right here. And of course, the provocation is, what can you build? Well, this is like nothing but like generic Tinker Toys. I mean, really super generic Tinker Toys, right? So you can cut them half sizes, you can cut them in fourth sizes so that they can build and create. These are paper straws. You can also use plastic straws, however you want to do it. But again, this is the provocation. When I set this up, I did not give them an example. I just gave them the bucket and the straws. And I said, wonder what you guys can make with this. And I picked up one and I started putting some together. And they just kind of watched for a minute and then we went on from there. But again, free and easy, guys. That's the name of the game. And then you can be a little bit more complex. So here are our Froebel gift cubes and some cups and some sticks. And look at what we're creating. Remember those forms of art and those forms of life and those forms of beauty? I mean, forms of life, forms of knowledge, and forms of beauty, sorry. Here we go. This is what's going on here. And so again, when I taught this live and when I had kids in my home, this is what we did. We created these types of things and notice how they, figured out how to make this sturdy. We're talking about weight here and we're talking about measurement. We're talking about balance. All of those concepts are here. You guys probably remember a while back, the cup stacking was so popular. Same concept. Here we go. Can we stack cups? What happens? What we need to do with those cups. So again, a tinkering station. This is very similar to what I have. I have actually I have more than this. You can get all of this at the Dollar Tree, the baskets, everything, the straws, the pipe cleaners, all kinds of stuff, pool noodles. These little metal tins that are magnetic on little magnetic trays, or these are actually just cookie sheets, right? Giving them all of these materials. And again, that literacy connection, Rosie Revere, engineer, great story. If you don't have it, check it out. I do have it. And I also have this book, The Most Magnificent Thing. Two very, very excellent books on engineering and technology. They really all go hand in hand, to be honest with you. All of these concepts go hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit about the arts. That is Mr. Carson in his first year with edible Play-Doh. They loved this. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. Pablo Picasso. And so how do we explore art with infants? Because I tell you, my childcare program was back in the mid 90s. And my staff would say all the time, we can't do that with the children. We can't do that with babies. I'm like, yep, yeah, you can. And we did this. We actually did the whole saran wrap thing. We did it with baggies because I felt like saran wrap was just a little too flimsy for them, but we also did it with wax paper. We did it with all kinds of things. So again, we're looking at these concepts. And if you guys are familiar with your state standards, you're going to see the connection that is probably in a lot of your standards. So this is how it connects. And again, once you get the handout, you will see the connections I've made again with the Florida state standards. So these are all of those concepts, and we don't want them to, we don't want to just sit down and listen to, like when I first started teaching, it would be like music time, and we would just sit down and it's like, okay, today we're going to listen to this album by Raffi, and we're all going to sing these Raffi songs, and when it's over, we're just going to go do something else. Again, I didn't know. I graduated with an elementary ed degree. And if you guys are anything familiar with what happened in the 80s, yeah, children didn't exist until they went to kindergarten. I mean, really, unless you really specifically majored in early childhood, which was almost non-existent at that time. For my school, I went to IU. Early childhood was the kindergarten endorsement, basically. So I didn't know any of this stuff at all until I really got into a program and started learning. This is probably a familiar activity to people. This is duct tape, contact paper, sticky side up. Love this activity. We did this in person in the class that I taught at Flacey. And this is one of my favorites. Yeah, again, my parents kind of went like, you all did that? And I'm like, yep, we did. We did this. This is cornstarch and water and food coloring. The good kind of food coloring, not the permanent kind that stains everybody's hands. Scarves, just free movement. One of the questions that we ask on a test that we give for one of the colleges I work for that I shall not name is give an example of what the difference is between creative movement and dancing. And our students really struggle with that. And I would say that probably most people don't understand the difference between creative movement and dancing. Dancing is specific and purposeful and gives, certain movements that have to be made or whatever, right? Creative movement is just letting the music go and just doing what comes naturally. We would do this every day before rest time in our program. They would get out the scarves, they would choose the music they wanted to listen to, and sometimes it was just the radio if they wanted to listen to the radio. And they would get out scarves, they would get out instruments. I mean, it was a true cacophony, right? But they enjoyed every single minute of it. It didn't matter whether they were on key, it didn't matter whether they were on beat, because eventually they're going to learn that. They're going to listen to the music and they're going to learn the beat. We did a lot of patterning and rhythm activities to help with that. But just the fact that they could just do whatever they wanted to do, and I had wooden floors. So the fact that they were in their sock feet most of the time was even better, because they could really move and really do whatever they wanted to. And then I also had one of these outside. Mine did not look nearly as fancy as this one, but I did create some ways for them to create music outside using common household objects and things that I bought from the Dollar Tree. It's a pegboard. The pegboard probably costs more than any of the rest of it combined. And pegboard hooks. I can't talk. And and we would switch it out. I would switch out different things. I was like, oh, I wonder what this would sound like, and that kind of thing. So just being very creative. And again, it's not expensive. My favorite one was the cheese grater. We went through a lot of wooden sticks because of the cheese grater, but that's okay. They really enjoyed it. Notice that in this picture, it's up pretty high, and that was simply because we had to have a discussion on, we don't want to get our fingers on it because it can bite you. So again, some of the amazing connections that we can make through literacy with these. Art, and I need to speed through this because I see we're winding down on time again. Art, body awareness, artistic expression. I read something about this, and I wish I could think about it right now and get it right. I'm probably going to slaughter it, but I read something the other day where it said, when they do this, this is an expression of what is in their mind. Okay, so we think, oh, well, that's not good, right? No, it really is, because to her, this means something. We don't see it, right? Unless she chooses to share it with us, but it means something to her. And so this is an expression. And so I just let them, whenever we had the art out, or the free center time, we always had art out. When it was her turn or their turn to go over there, they were like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, you can do whatever you want to. You can use this paper. We can get you some different paper, whatever you would like to do. And I felt like that was just so very important to them. And then really getting them to understand and appreciate music, movement, dramatic play, and even cooking, right? Cooking is an art. Cooking envelops all of these concepts pretty much, but it is also an art. And they really picked up on that. So sometimes we did do some, not so creative things. This is literally cookie cutter art, but it's not really cookie cutter art, right? Because they could do whatever they wanted to with it. And then of course I always had interchangeable theme bags where we celebrated holidays and such in our program. I know some programs don't do that, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever you're doing, whatever the concepts are, things were available for them to do, and they loved doing this. Of course, they cheesed it up for the camera all the time. They were so used to me taking their pictures. And here's what it looks like for cooking. This was homemade applesauce for Thanksgiving. And then this was Mardi Gras. We made our own king cakes with babies inside. And so we talked about why there's a king cake, why there's a baby inside of it, what the baby means, et cetera, et cetera. And I have the best video of them with their first king cake. They did it every year. And they were talking about it, and I put a baby in both of them because, you know, they were like, well, I want to, you know, I wanted everybody to get a baby. So it was just fun. They just, the conversation that they had while they were eating those king cakes and finding the babies was just hilarious. One of my favorite books, When Picasso Met Matisse. And then, of course, there are so many books about dancing and creative movement that you can locate as well. And so we're going to wrap up here with some math concepts. Infant and toddler, that's Mr. Carson right there. I love the position that he is in. I love the concentration on his face and how he's working with that particular piece. Albert Einstein, pure mathematics is, in its way, the poetry of logical ideas. I am not a math person, you guys, and I fully blame it on my parents. They know I blame it on them because I did not get a lot of this experience as a kid, and I do not have a math brain. My husband grew up, however, fully exploring his environment and was tinkering at a very young age. And yeah, I didn't get to do that. The most I got to do is my dad did work for the phone company, and I did learn how to take apart and put together phones. So, you know, there I got a little bit, but not enough to be a real math person. So you can see here again, the fine motor skills, exploring more, one-to-one correspondence, numbers of things, time, space, all of those things. And we start this with some, you know, it's okay to have some commercial toys going on in there. There's value in both of these, right? And we need to give them that experience. But what could we find that is inexpensive and a real world everyday object in which they might be able to do this creatively, sorry. A connection to my Diary of a Worm. We now have coding, right? So we're teaching children how to code, pipe cleaners with little googly eyes and small beads. Of course, this is for our older children pretty much. And patterning. I mean, how cool is that? And it makes a connection to our unit that we were talking about. Some of my favorite books for counting and such. You can't go wrong with those. And then here again are my kiddos when I was teaching in the college in my early years that we brought in and did the whole classroom was Diary of a Worm, basically. So again, we're looking at fine motor, numbers of words and symbols. Now, the worms that they are measuring here are like fishing worms, the rubber fishing worms you can get. You can go buy them at Walmart, wash them because they come with a slimy kind of oily thing on them that is, I think, attracts fish. And I just washed them, cleaned them up, and provided them. But we also had real worms that they got to measure, which was hard. And they talked about how much it was hard to measure them because they were wiggly and they wouldn't hold still. But again, it's just a good way to really get them, and data analysis was going on here, right? Well, this worm's bigger than this worm, and how many worms were big and how many worms were small, those types of things. Here's another one of those Tough Spot trays. I love this. Tough Spot pom-poms, colored plates, and you can get chopsticks anywhere. You can actually order them on Amazon. I think a package of 100 of them is like $8. And how cool is that? And you notice that the numbers are not on the tray or on the plates. So they have the option. How many yellow ones do you want to get? How many green ones do you want to put on your plate? They're picking them up with the chopsticks and putting them on the plate. So we've got color sorting, we've got counting, we've got fine motor, we've got color recognition, all of those things going on. Again, here's our live worm versus our fishing worm that we had there. And then another way, one of the other units that I did when I lived in that area was a Kentucky Derby unit because I lived outside of Louisville, Kentucky. Derby was big. We ate, breathed, lived, and slept Derby. So I did a Derby unit. And so we talked about measuring things by hands because that's how we measure horses. So my measuring station for that unit was hands and horses. The literacy connections, again, classic inch by inch, so many of them. And guess what? Okay, we are at the end of that very speedy STEAM presentation, and I can stop sharing if we have time for questions. I'm not sure if we do, but if the handout is there, please, please, please download it.
Thank you so much, Dr. McKay.
Oh, thank you. I was like, I couldn't hear you.
No, that was okay. I didn't know if Steph was going to jump on or if I was jumping on, but
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate everything. And I know you've got another presentation, so thank you so much for everything that you do for us.
Thanks.
Recording.